right. Let's talk to Ben Habib and see if he, like me, thinks that this is at least probably a step in the right direction. Ben, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I mean, I'm going to take a little bit of credit for this, as should you. Those of us who have been oscillating and complaining about how useless this government have been since they got in July, and why they're not spending the right amount of money in the right places. But it seems to me that Keir Starmer hasn't made this decision. Donald Trump is now in charge of our defence policy, and old Starmer's so frightened of him that he's just done what he thinks he wants.
Well, of course, Starmer did promise when he was standing for election to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. But you might recall when he took office, he then set up an inquiry into how best to do it. And for an inquiry, you just read long grass, basically. Yes. And he's slightly done that again, Mike, hasn't he? You know, this defence spending increase doesn't happen until 2027. And it makes you wonder why, if the defence increase in defence spending is required, why wait 2 years and expose the country to insecurity for a 2-year period? You know, they're always doing things that you and I would regard as a prerequisite for the security and betterment of our country. They're always doing those with great reluctance. They seem to need to be dragged into doing it. But the terrific thing here, and you're right to point it out, is that by setting an agenda proudly for the United States of America, President Trump is forcing other countries across the world to stand on their own 2 feet, and rightly so. And the United Kingdom must stand on its own 2 feet. We can't perpetually rely and expect the Americans to protect us. We've got to do it ourselves. And it's high time the rest of Europe did it as well.
Exactly right. But isn't it remarkable how much Donald Trump has managed to achieve in the 1 month that he's been in, considering that the whole of Europe basically has been treading water on defence for the best part of the last decade and a half, hasn't it?
Sinking. You know, the two most offensive words, I think, in British security matters, the peace dividend. Yeah. There's no such thing as a peace dividend. When you're at peace, actually, you should be arming up to make sure that you stay at peace. Right. And what we've done is be incredibly lazy, indulge ourselves in all the ideological claptrap expenditure which you were referring to, including net zero, and allowed our military to be hollowed out. And at the same time, actually, we've gone abroad and we've sort of picked fights. You know, you can't make it up. If you're going to go abroad and you're going to yank people's tails and declare war as we did in Afghanistan, then Iraq, we declared war on Libya, we stirred up the entire Middle East, Egypt nearly fell, Syria became a destabilized state. You know, we created huge amount of trouble ourselves in the various interventions that we had abroad. And at the same time, we were cutting military spending. And you'll also remember that when Zelensky was given permission to fire British Storm Shadow missiles into Russian territory, that very same day, we announced military cuts. We've been so lazy and sort of failing to join up the dots and make policies that protect this country. And it's a delight to see, actually, the pressure being brought on the United Kingdom to do what's right for the United Kingdom.
Yes, for the defence of the realm, literally. Let's have a look at what Starmer said yesterday about Europe becoming more unstable.
Nonetheless, one of the great lessons of our history is that instability in Europe will always wash up on our shores, and that tyrants like Putin only respond to strength. Russia is a menace in our waters, in our airspace, and on our streets. They've launched cyber attacks on our NHS. Only 7 years ago, a chemical weapons attack on the streets of Salisbury. We must stand by Ukraine, because if we do not achieve a lasting peace, then the economic instability, the threats to our security, they will only grow. I believe we must now change our approach to national security, so we are ready to meet the challenges of our volatile world. The reason for this is straightforward. Putin's aggression does not stop in Ukraine. Russian spy ships menace our waters. Russian planes enter our airspace. Russian cyber attacks hit our NHS. And just 7 years ago, there was a Russian chemical weapons attack in broad daylight on the streets of Salisbury. We can't hide from this. And I know people have felt the impact of this conflict through rising bills and prices. But unless Ukraine is properly protected from Putin, then Europe will only become more unstable, and that will hurt us even more.
Of course, the great irony, Ben, about all of this is that, and I made this point, I think, on Twitter last night. He wants to talk about, defending our shores and making sure that we remain safe in our own country. But he doesn't address the fact that, there's quite a lot of people coming into the country who are making this country unstable without any help from Russia. Thank you very much indeed. They just jump on a dinghy in Calais.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's not a flippant observation, by the way. We've got now in this country, who knows what the exact figure is, but estimates of 1.2 million people who've got here illegally.
Yeah.
We can only assume that they're not law-abiding because they broke the law to get here, which means that we've got a domestic problem created by a failure to enforce our borders. And at the heart of security is the enforcement of your borders. Actually, it's pathetic that I should have to say what I'm about to say, but wouldn't it be great if President Trump, as a condition of ongoing NATO membership, required EU member states and the United Kingdom to actually enforce our borders?
Yes.
To say that, you're only getting our protection, you're only going to get NATO membership of the United States if you guys actually do what's basically required, which is to enforce your borders, prevent people from coming into your country illegally. What is an invasion? It is people coming into your country without your permission.
Right.
And
well, it seems to me to be a bit like one of those sort of old films about Roman soldiers, where they pitch up in some part of southern England, build themselves a fort, go out and fight the enemy, and start trying to take hold of other bits of the country, and then by the time they get back, their fort's been invaded by a load of people who they didn't see coming.
Well, exactly. And again, it's just you said it in a sort of jokey way, but that's the reality. If we don't protect our borders, if we allow into this country all sorts of forces, most of which you can only assume will be maligned to us because they're criminal in any event, having got into the country illegally, we are exposing a civil society in the United Kingdom to repeated assaults. And we see that. And, it gets brushed under the carpet. And for that sort of, he obviously learnt it off by heart, but for that speech by Starmer yesterday, if it was so poignant, so required, so serious, why hadn't he already done this? Why didn't he do it the minute he got into office? He talks about the chemical attack in Salisbury 7 years ago. That was 7 years ago. It's taken the British government 7 years to wake up, to respond to it. It's pathetic. We are not taking defence seriously. We are not taking our borders seriously. We're enmeshed in this global order, which we put first. Even yesterday, when he made that speech, he was talking about Ukraine's needs. Fine, I understand that. But all British foreign policy needs to be made with British interests in mind. And if they align with Ukraine's, great, we can offer up our protection to Ukraine, but our interests have to be taken care of. And again, it was impressive to see the way President Trump has looked after the United States' interests by demanding some kind of recompense for the hundreds of billions of dollars that have been spent by the United States on defending Ukraine. And that came in that minerals deal. And we should be doing the same for the United Kingdom. I remember going back to Iraq, without wishing to digress too much. We put billions into Iraq. British soldiers died, and we got no commercial advantage out of that war whatsoever. Where was the thinking about our interests? And we've got to start thinking about the United Kingdom first and foremost. That's what our government is charged to do.
Yes. But once again, Trump is showing the way, isn't he? Because he's got this deal underway now with Zelensky. And isn't it interesting that all those people, particularly on the left last week, who were talking about, Trump has sold out to Russia, he's a complete charlatan, he's in the pay of the Kremlin, he's locking Zelensky out of the talks. It now looks as though Zelensky not only has offered his resignation in order to get a peace deal done, but he's also signing a US minerals deal to help mend the ties, in the words of the Financial Times this morning, and with Washington, because it's a commercial deal at the end of the day. Donald Trump's quite right. We can't just keep pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into Ukraine and see it disappear down a sort of great big hole, when in fact they've got very valuable minerals which Trump wants a piece of. And I think that's the way to do proper foreign policy.
That's reasonable. I mean, I don't know the details of the deal, but there should be recompense for assistance provided.
Yeah,
and
course.
100 billion, hundreds of billions of dollars is massive. And I also have great sympathy, while we're on the subject, with President Trump when he says a lot of that money has probably gone astray.
Yeah.
I have no doubt it's gone astray. The arms trade is a crooked business at the best of times.
Right.
And
Ukraine is a crooked country, let's face it.
And Ukraine is a crooked country, and the approach we took and the Americans took to the Ukrainian-Russian conflict was to just give Zelensky a blank check.
Yeah.
Here you go. Here's a blank check. You do with it that which you wish to do. And that is no way to run our foreign policy. We have to make sure there are checks and balances in place. We have to make sure the British interests are put first and foremost in the way that we prosecute our foreign policy. And I'm delighted that Trump is showing us the way.
Absolutely right. And while we're on the subject of what Labour did in Iraq and Afghanistan before when they were last in power, I've got this from Soph on the subject of ramping up our kind of domestic defence agenda. She says, Mike, we weren't fit to fight under Blair. He committed troops with no or poor kit, minimum ammunition, not enough radios, sat phones, armament, unarmoured snatched Land Rovers that led to many deaths and injuries. 6 military police died as a direct result of the above. I remember the Red Caps who were just sort of cornered in a sort of a small building, and they were all basically executed by Iraqis. And so, whatever this Labour government says it's going to do with defence, they better do it right.
Yeah, and you never believe them. And you might also recall armoured vehicles, which were, absolutely hopeless at defending themselves or withstanding the blast of IEDs. With lots of British soldiers injured because they were sent into battle with inappropriate protection. Right. And we can't have that again. We've got to really concentrate on modern war, the kind of warfare that we might face in the future, and make sure we're absolutely ready for it, including conventional boots on the ground type stuff. It's not all about cyber warfare and the rest of it. No. It is about having conventional weapons. When you've got Russian tanks coming at you, sending out radio signals ain't going to do the job. You're going to have
But isn't it funny that just before the Russian invasion, I mean, I remember speaking to sort of defence experts who were busy telling me that the age of the old battleground is over. It's all going to be about cyber. We're all going to be it's going to be like the Terminator with sort of robots fighting each other. You won't need real people. Well, that turned out to be complete and utter balderdash.
Yeah, you've got to have people. You've got to have people.
Exactly. Well, you've got to have good people as well. Good to talk to you, Ben. Thanks very much indeed. Ben Habib there, talking about, former Deputy Leader, of course, of Reform UK, talking about what we need to do with this money that is going to be spent on defence.